This is Canvas to Conference Room, creative practice to creative management. So I was wondering if you guys wouldn't mind, I'll just give in a quick little update on your current work and positions to give some context to our panel. We can start with you, Denise.
Sure. My name is Denise Saunders Thompson, and I'm currently the president and CEO of the International Association of Blacks in Dance. And we are a dance service organization that is based here in Silver Spring, Maryland, providing services to the Black dance sector, as well as the larger dance ecosystem at this point, at this current juncture of time. But we offer a number of programs from our annual conference and festival, which I describe as a movable feast because it travels around the country and into Canada. Along with other programming specific to dance classes, and panels, and workshops, and some symposiums. So that's just a brief intro of what we do.
Great. Erin, if you wanted to go next.
Sure. My name is Erin Mitchell-Nelson, and I am the managing director and sometime choreographer for the Taffy Punt Theater Company. Current situation, well, our company, we've been around for about 15 years. We're a nonprofit that's based in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. Most of our performances happen at the Capitol Hill Arts Workshop, or CHAW. But our company was founded, our artistic director, Marcus Kidd, along with 5 or 6 of us, founded this company in 2005 with the idea of sort of meshing together the classical and the contemporary, and of sort of the original idea was like a sort of guerrilla DIY theater, dance, music hodgepodge. And we've sort of continued in that vein, but most all of our work, we strive to have theater and movement and music elements. And all of our company members are currently either professional actors, dancers, or musicians. And currently we are on hold, like I think much of the performing arts sector. So we had a performance scheduled to open up at the end of April. So that's been postponed. I think we finally found a time slot it'll be a year from now before we could remount that. So yeah, that's our current state of affairs.
The wildest of times.
Yeah.
Christopher?
Aloha, y'all. My name is Christopher K. Morgan, he, his, and pronouns. I'm the Executive Artistic Director of Dance Place, located in Northeast Washington, D.C. And Dance Place has been around for 39 years. I've been its Executive Artistic Director for 3 years now. We are a presenter of dance performances about 37 weekends this current year, had things not changed due to the current global health crisis. And in addition to that, we also are a school for youth and adults and a neighborhood community center that provides, in addition to the tuition-based dance classes that are part of our school, we also provide after-school enrichment programs for neighborhood children and teens that expand even larger throughout the summer. Like so many artists and arts administrators, I'm multi-hyphenate, so I'm also the artistic director of my own dance company, Christopher K. Morgan and Artists. We too had a show that was supposed to premiere May 2nd and 3rd. Luckily, we think that is being just postponed and rescheduled. Obviously, there's so much hanging in the balance for all sectors and arts. And then a third hat I wear is I also am the director of the dance program at OMI International Arts Center, which is an international residency program located 2.5 hours north of New York City. And the dance program in particular brings together 10 dancer choreographers from all over the world. Usually as many as 7 countries are represented. These artists come together not knowing one another, but having gone through an application process and a panel selection process. And my role there is to facilitate their creative exchange in a non-product oriented environment. So all of these different things kind of cobble together to make up my life.
Thank you so much. It's really cool to have a panel that so many different hats are being worn, but there's sort of this connection of dance. I really love that. I come from a dance background as well, so selfishly, it's really fun for me too. Obviously, we're in a kind of interesting world right now, but I wanted to, before we touch on that, maybe back up to broader and potentially simpler or just as complicating questions. I'm really interested in transitions, and I think it's really interesting to have an artistic career and a management career, and or have dipped your toes in both. And I've always thought of the transitions as being sort of mystical, and they just happen, and then all of a sudden you're from one place to the next. So I was wondering if you might candidly be willing to talk about your transition from having a career or an interest in art, and then finding yourself as a manager of it.
I can begin. Mine happened, as I would suspect most people's do. In my undergraduate program, I went to VCU for dance and choreography, and finishing up that senior year, last semester, I remember them really drilling into us about how to get your own insurance. You know, they were talking about COBRA. This was like late 90s, and so COBRA insurance, and how to put together your resume and prepare yourself for auditions, and moving to New York City, which is what everybody did. So there was. It wasn't until right at the end of our senior year of undergrad where I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to figure out how to make this amazing life I've experienced in undergrad for 4 years work in real life. Like, this beautiful, mystical, magical existence of 4 years of dancing, like that's gonna disappear, isn't it? And so I chose not to move to New York City with the rest of my friends, which was what everybody was doing at the time, and stayed in Richmond. And I ended up working for the Latin Ballet of Virginia, which is a company that's Latin American and contemporary fusion movement, and very quickly found myself working behind the computer with the artistic director, who she needed help with grant writing. We were getting a lot of funding from the Virginia Commission for the Arts. She was piecing together a huge educational program that was going into the schools. And so she just needed somebody. She was from Bogota, Colombia, and at that point wasn't as fluent, or as, she just wasn't as confident with her English writing and speaking skills. And she just said, I need help. And so I found myself there, and very quickly learned how to write a grant and how to put a budget together. And I feel like she and I were sort of learning this together. And it just sort of went from there. I felt that for me, it tapped into some skills that just came to me very innately. Organizing and being a bit of a leader, but also finding a lot of satisfaction in supporting other people, and I just felt like it was a natural fit for me. So it just sort of went from there, and that was my transition. I all the while continued dancing, but I since that point have always had my foot in some sort of administration or management capacity.
It's so great to hear that towards the end of your undergraduate training, there was some prompting to prepare for that. I think it's something that we're seeing more and more of in undergraduate dance programs in particular, performing arts programs, like trying to ready students for that. But I think for a long time that was really lacking. There was just such a focus on the training of the craft and the body. And I think something that really resonates with me in parallels is like a kind of opportunity and autodidacticness that happens like you're thrust into the position somehow out of necessity usually. And then from that, you realize, actually, I do have these translatable skill sets, these ways of communicating that happen so fluently in the rehearsal studio actually do lend themselves really well to writing. There is a bit of a gap sometimes, but they actually connect. And I think that's something that's really important to highlight for performing artists, because it doesn't always make itself readily apparent that those are such translatable skills, and yet they are. For me, I came to dance a little late in life, at least in terms of concert dance and the training that's involved with that and getting myself onto stages. I was 17 when I started. And when I was in college, I was actually not a dance major, but heavily involved in the dance program at the University of California at Irvine, where I was studying writing. And then that kind of wound its way, as you said a second ago, Caitlin, like the path unfolded, and that led me to these great opportunities as a performer. Stopped going to school, fully invested in that. But I think a critical moment for me was a few years later when I moved to Washington, D.C. the first time to dance with Liz Lerman. The structure of the company at that time required each of the dancers of the company to take on some amount of administrative responsibility, perhaps organizing and conducting a residency, being the contact person with the university partner or the presenting partner to organize schedule and community engagement activities and travel. And so this well-supported and somewhat light administrative load was a kind of good training ground. And then fast forward several years later, when I became interested in being a choreographer, and just really realized that it takes so much more than being in the studio in terms of, as you just beautifully articulated, Erin, the grant writing and putting together a budget. It was just a moment of learning, okay, this is what I need to do in order to support the work I want to create. And again, I think there's so many translatable skills. When I was a freelance dancer, having to manage my calendar and make sure the overlapping projects that I was doing could actually happen and not drop the ball on one choreographer while a theater project I was performing in had overlapping rehearsals, how to communicate that, how to make sure people understood where I was coming from, how to market myself, how to make sure I maintained good relationships so that people would want to hire me back. All of that directly translated into my work as an arts administrator. So yeah, it was definitely an unfolding path, but there were these seeds of things that I learned along the way that helped that. And I now can reflect back and see the correlation of skill sets much more clearly than I did when I was sort of like diving into some new roles.
Oh, that was interesting, Christopher. My path, I thought I was going to perform. I went to Howard University. I came in to the university as a performance major, specifically musical theater, actually. So, you know, the triple threat, singing, dancing, and acting. That was my path. Come from a line of singers and actors and actresses in my family. My mother was a music teacher and grandmother. I mean, it's in the family. So I was like, that's my trajectory. I'm performing. But when I got to college, and that first year, you did not perform. You paid your dues, and all of the freshmen worked behind the scenes. And the class was theater practicum, and we were doing all of the lighting, sound, set design. You know, you were doing all of that work, and I actually fell in love with it. Who knew? Like it was the best thing. I had the best time. I enjoyed actually seeing the stage from that point of view and having those types of experiences. So in college, I actually changed my major. I flipped my major, and theater arts administration, and Howard University had a theater arts administration program. So I studied arts administration. That was my path. And then my minor was still at that point musical theater, and then I switched completely over to dance as a minor. So I came out, I flipped it, and I just knew in undergrad that that's the path that I wanted. Learning about, as we've been hearing now, the gig economy and having to, audition and you know, that process, I didn't want to do that after having the opportunity to really learn about it and hear about it from all of, you know, the great, wonderful people that had come from this lineage at the university. You know, the Debbie Allens, the Felicia Rashads, they were coming back during that time when I was there in college, you know, doing workshops and talking about the process. And I just kept hearing, you know, it's gig to gig to gig. And I was like, I don't want that. I want to be in control of my my finances, my future. I actually want to produce. I want to have that type of responsibility and be able to make change on my terms, the way that I'd like to do, you know, that I want to do it, the way that I want to see it, and the way that I see others experiencing it. And so that was a very, very clear path for me. So after undergrad, went to grad school at UCLA, got my master's in arts producing and management, came out. My first job was a general manager for several dancers corps in Atlanta, Georgia. So, you know, it's been my path, but also, you know, still dance, still sing, still do a little bit of, you know, stuff here and there, but that has clearly been my passion and my love that I discovered in college, and you know, here I am. I know I'm very, very, very blessed and very lucky to be doing what I love to do full out, as I say, all the time, just on the administrative side.
That was such a treat for me to hear all of that. It's so interesting that different paths can look really differently, but also have so much in common. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'm kind of wondering, as you have transitioned into arts management at whatever point in time, that is a term that I use to describe the program I'm currently in, and it's still one that people go, huh, to sometimes, and haven't heard it before, or don't know what it entails. So what have you found is your definition of arts management as you like sort of transitioned into it? What do you think an arts manager does? Which I know is a really vague, broad question, but I'd love to hear your insight.
Everything. we are so duplicitous, like, and we do everything. Like, we wear all of the hats, which I think is amazing about us. I think we are very unique creatures and creative creatures. I often refer to myself, you know, as a creative, but creative in this path, because it takes a lot for us on this side to make sure that the art is happening. And I think the lens for me specifically is very unique, because I'm able, you know, to use that right brain, left brain pretty evenly. And I can say, it's not that I empathize, I understand, because I do it. And then at the same time, I'm like, but I know these numbers need to match what I want to do and what you want to do and what we want to produce. But yeah, I mean, we do it all. But yeah, I refer to myself as a creative, just like anybody else in this field.
Absolutely. And I know this true to be both of both Denise and Aaron. For me, I think it's a lot about creating opportunity. Mm-hmm. And then having that creative side that can balance with the logistical and practical to create the space and the foundation in which artists can do what is calling them. Because so much of the work that I do as an administrator is really trying to be responsive to or listen to where artists are taking us. I think they are some of the truest leaders in our society and often advance our thinking, take us into new stages of creativity, social activism, dreaming, all of these things that are so important to help move us forward. And I don't think it's fair to count on every artist to be an administrator. Some come with that skill, some learn that skill, and I also think some should not have to if they it can have the right support networks. So those of us that can provide that, whether that's our full-time job or a hybrid job that we take on, and I think that looks lots of different ways. Arts administration can look like the director in the room who is creating the space for people to thrive within that particular project, or it can look like more of the administrative underpinnings of managing the Excel sheets and making sure the budget balances so that room can be had and that process can unfold. But for me, it's really about creating opportunity and the foundation.
I would say the exact same thing. You said it so well. I don't know that I have much more to add, but that is pretty much my perspective of as well. And I have found that as a arts administrator, the programs that I have been most drawn to working with encourage the creativity and opportunity of other artists. I am a graduate of the AU Arts Management Program, and for a long time, my thesis work was really focused on just creating opportunity. And I feel like, in a nutshell, that is what we do. And as creatives, as you said, Denise, because I love that way that you put it. I know that I have to have part of me has to be involved in the creating still, so that I feel a connection to the artist that I am supporting. And if I don't have all of that, if I don't feel well-rounded, then I'm not doing my best work. Yeah, I think you both perfectly articulated my feelings on it as well. But yeah, it really is support. And like you said, Christopher, there are plenty of artists who have no desire whatsoever to sit down and write a grant for themselves. And I find so many times I will say, you have to do this. There's this individual artist grant and it's due next week. You have to do it. You're perfect for it. And they're like, and I realize that's not their thing. They're not going to do it. It's not that they don't want to, but they know that they don't have that skill set. And that's where I feel like, okay, I can help you with that, and that I feel like is my role, to be a supporter and to create those opportunities.
Yeah, I loved the way you put it, Denise, saying that the creative management is just as creative as creating the art itself, to use that word 3 times in one sentence. But I think that as I've applied to jobs within and outside of the art world, people have actually looked at dance on my resume and seen it as like a soft skill when it comes to management, but it led them to believe that I might be a creative problem solver. So I'm wondering if you guys could speak to how your artistic experiences and what is definitely not a soft skill has fed you or allowed you to hone in on characteristics that have transitioned well into your management style. What about your artistic practice really lends itself to your managing?
I think this answers or is going in the direction you're asking. The first thing that comes to mind for me, and I think, Christopher, it was you that mentioned this earlier, a transferable skill that I found works really in my favor is learning how to, as an artist, learning how to talk about what I am creating, because I feel like that completely transfers to any administration skill, especially involving writing, the grant writing element. Being able to articulate art through the written word or the spoken word, I think, can be really difficult for people. But if that for me, I found transitions into the administration side.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And adding to that, something that's been helpful for me, a lot of folks have asked me what kind of management training I've done, and I think they're looking for answers that are very, I don't know, corporate training processes or graduate school degrees. But for me, so much of the management training that I have comes from being a choreographer or having been in other folks' choreographic practices. And there's a really interesting kind of chemical balance that can happen that for me is a great environment where there is clearly someone leading the project forward, but an openness to listening and collaborative input that helps it become more than it originally had been conceived to be. And that's a really delicate balance of leadership and collaboration. And both of those things, I think, work best hand in hand. And at some point there needs to be a decision made. And in many models that comes from, you know, one or fewer people. But if there's a good synthesis where everyone feels like their voice can contribute to a project and a process, and that contribution has been thoroughly listened to and vetted, and then maybe it's not the right fit for that moment, but it has been heard, acknowledged, and researched maybe, or, you know, really deeply vetted, then things move forward and you have a team mindset behind whatever the project is. And when I think back over my experiences as a dancer and as a choreographer, the most artistically enriching and fulfilling moments had some synthesis of that in it. And that directly translates for me to leading an organization and administrative staff, making sure that we have a real opportunity for everyone to be heard and inform the decisions that ultimately have to be made.
Yeah, Christopher, I'm with you as well. So, you know, we have in my office a think tank space. And when we are launching new programs or we're thinking about making changes, I invite everyone to the think tank. And that is the process, so that, as Christopher was just saying, everyone has been provided the opportunity to, you know, put their ideas into it, provide, you know, information, thought partnering, however, you know, but it's the think tank, and that's the space where, you know, I say dream big. Let's like, you know, let's blow this thing up, or you know, let's all put our best thinking caps on to come to you know, some type of whatever that might be around a certain project or an idea. And then it's my responsibility, you know, as the leader of the association, to kind of take all of that, make sure everyone's had the opportunity to provide input, and then come back with, so this is what I heard, this is where we're going. But it does give everyone the opportunity to say, I'm vested in this process. I've provided my best thinking to how we might be changing or creating a new program, or reaching out to our members. Yeah, and I think that skill of being able to listen, take in elements, you know, knowing that everything that's said we can't do or does not apply, but then being able to kind of go back and create the magic with the help of the staff is really a wonderful thing. And so that's what we do. That's kind of, you know, the process in our office, and it's great. Everyone, it's very family too. You know, it's an opportunity for us to kind of all sit at the table and listen to each other, and, you know, kind of have our fun, but at the same time know that we are really setting a course for next steps in a program or a project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were talking to a little bit about just how, sorry, just gathering this to say it more clearly. As you were sharing that, I was just thinking a little bit about how important stakeholder feedback is, and that we have a lot of times, my thinking is about concentric circles. And so, or even Venn diagrams where circles might overlap with each other, and there's these different communities that come together and have intersecting or overlapping interests. It's something that's very true of Dance Place, where we have sort of audience members and adult dance class students, and some folks are both, and some don't even know that the other program exists, which is something that we're trying to work on, but it's also based on your interests. And then we have youth classes, and some of those families know about some of the other programs and they don't. And then we have our community programs, and then we have our role in the national field, which is like this really big circle that sort of like folds into that, and artists come and tour in our space and they see all of these different things. And so I think a lot about how those think tanks and those different listening circles kind of expand and contract and reshape. And something that I've been trying to figure out that I don't have clear answers to because of the complexity of our community stakeholders is, where do we see those same folks show up in some of these different community stakeholder circles? And how does their overlap knowledge feed us? And then how does discrete knowledge feed us, feed our processes? And so just acknowledging, like, there's just so many ways that this stuff can happen. But I think performing artists are trained to listen so well. Live performance is a constantly shifting environment. It's one of the things that so many of us love about it, is you could see the same performance twice and it'll be different because the air is different. A problem with a prop happens, an audience member laughs louder and longer in a moment, and it shifts how everything unfolds, and the performers have to respond to that. And I think that listening and responsiveness is just so critical to all of this.
That makes me think, both of you, I'm gonna also try to pull together my thoughts so that I'm making sense to everyone. It's bringing me around to the current situation that we're all currently in, and having to think creatively. And as creative thinkers, we have to be able to take a situation that may not be working in our favor, or we have hit a wall, or there's a dilemma or something that's preventing us from executing whatever final product we're working towards, and shift our thinking and find a new way to execute it. So that creative problem solving element. I unrelated to Taffety Punk, I'm also a singer in a band, and we recently, we're in the process of releasing an album, and we have an exhibit that's going to be going along with it, and there are shows that we've had to cancel. And so my arts manager brain has been thinking, what can we do in the virtual landscape to make all of this happen? Because obviously nothing's happening. People aren't coming together in a space. This isn't working out for us like we had planned. So it's calling on my work as an administrator, but also as a creative problem solver, to figure out how can we do this? How can we make that happen? And so I think that everybody sort of, that's an overarching thing for, I think, all administrators.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great segue into, this is yet another pretty giant, different kind of transition than transitioning from artist to arts manager. It's just transitioning from normalcy to whatever this is. And I was wondering if you could speak to how you have used your tools to kind of prioritize during this time of setting. I feel like it's a time of putting out fires in some ways. And I have found myself paralyzed, like, what do I do first? And my responsibilities are pretty low stakes. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind speaking to how you've creatively prioritized in this time.
I'll be honest, and I guess I'll throw myself on the sword and say I haven't figured that out quite yet. I know I'm responding because I'm in overdrive. And so, before we started our conversation, I guess we were just talking about trying to find that space, like, for the weekend. And I think last weekend, Saturday, was the one day out of these last 3 weeks that I said, I'm not touching any IBD work. I know I sit in a very unique position when you talk about a service organization. And so, it is the continual, we need to be of service. We need to be of service. How can we better be of service? We have people, in this industry, in this community, who literally are losing their homes, their businesses, their livelihoods. How can we, my mind is, on overdrive. I am trying to sleep. I'm making a very concerted effort to sleep, but I have to be honest and say my days and my nights are long. I am now absolutely inundated with Zoom calls. I think it was okay like a few weeks ago, but now it's just like the space and time that we used to have, because we could be in our offices and could step away, we no longer have. And so I'm finding my schedule just, back to back to back in response to what's happening. And so I am, though, walking around very consciously thinking I've got to take care of myself. And I have absolutely adopted the mantra, put your mask on first before you can help others. So I am making a conscious effort, but the mask is on all the time. And I'm just, it is a lot. And so I'm really, I will, full transparency say it's very, very difficult, though I'm very conscious of the fact that I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself so that I can help other people, my staff, this community. It's difficult. I want to say, it's going to slow down. We keep watching the news and we're talking about, the curve, and we're still going up. And I feel like I'm still riding the curve, but in a different way, because the need is getting greater and greater and greater. And so we're just trying to, do our part. But it's difficult. I think, I'm riding this wave like everyone else, but consciously, I think making sure that at some point, though it could be more, that I take time to take care of myself.
Thank you for articulating the importance of that.
Yeah.
It's so true. It was interesting for me. I came back from the winter holidays. I'd had some time away with family over the kind of late December, Western New Year period of time. And I came back and I realized that I just felt really unhealthy in my body, and coming from a movement standpoint first. And that was an accumulation of years of work that had taken me away from the studio and less physicalized, and schedules that had just made it difficult to be thoughtful about my own health and self-care. And I chose that. It wasn't something that happened to me. I was like, okay, I will prioritize this in this moment. And I came back from the new year and I was like, that has to end. That really has to end. And I'm so grateful. Like I really made a concerted effort to make space and time for my yoga practice, which has been around for 20 years, but had really fallen away. And in that, and that's a combination of both physical and, depending on how you practice, mental, emotional, spiritual health as well. And it was just this huge effort that I made throughout January and February. And then as I found myself encountering this huge global health crisis and its accompanying financial impact, I felt stronger inside. I realized about 2 weeks in that was partly due to having taken care of myself for a little while. And it was just sort of circumstantial that it happened to be in anticipation of this, but I'm so grateful that it happened. And I have made a priority I've been practicing yoga in my home with my husband 5 days a week, usually, for an hour. And we sort of replicate, we turn on all of our heaters and try and get our bodies really warm. And we brought little weights and sometimes we do it with weights. So we've just been very focused on it and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves within this really complex time of trying to take care of others. And I think for me, what I witnessed is it took all of the skill sets that we've been talking about, the creative thinking balanced with the logistical thinking, and boiled it down and concentrated it into this hyper intensity. And so for us, primarily with my dance place hat on, I'll speak to, one of the first things we did was a really deep budget dive, and we looked at everything that was going out and everything that was not going to come in, and how do we try and support all of that going out, meaning payments to artists, payments to teachers, et cetera, and all the things not coming in, ticket revenue, tuition, possibly some grants changing because maybe that programming's not running and that grantor is a stickler for, if the program doesn't run, we don't give you the funds. Other grantors have been amazing and very flexible and open to the idea that this is a most unusual time. And so, yes, you have that funding. You may not be able to use it for its originally intended purpose. Why don't you convert it to support payments to artists and staff? So literally ran multiple budget scenarios. What if we're closed through the end of March? Well, that's passed. What if we're closed through the end of May? We've also done a scenario, what if we're closed, like truly closed with absolutely no programming? Good goddess, I hope this is not the case, but through August. And so just to be financially prepared for that, and I had to run, we had already had a board meeting scheduled for Dance Place that happened just about a week, a little over a week ago. So the financial director and I had all of that prepared to share with the board and had already been making decisions based on that. And then coupled with that was the creative thinking, as Erin already beautifully mentioned. How do we virtualize some programming? How do we stay connected to our community when everyone is isolated? And the performing arts and dance is a big gathering thing, both for the practitioners of it and the viewers of it. So we did a bunch of things really quickly DIY, and then we're looking at how to keep refining and learn from that, but we wanted some stuff up as soon as possible. We wanted all of that to be free, and amazingly that's inspired donations, but that was not the intent at all. The intent was to stay connected in a time of isolation. And the deep budget dive allowed us to really assess, you know what, we are strong and healthy enough financially that we can continue to pay our staff, that we can pay 75% of all teacher fees. Most of our teachers are independent contractors that teach at probably 3 different studios and are cobbling together their monthly bills payments from these 3 different teaching jobs. So we made that commitment to them that they would get 75% of all of their fees. And then all of the artists that have performances that are affected by the pandemic are receiving 50% of their fees on the originally scheduled date. So if you had a performance May 10th and 11, you're still going to get 50% on May 18th. And we just really wanted to acknowledge the work that's happened despite the changes. The additional 50% would come, and hopefully more if we're able to fundraise beyond that, on the rescheduled date. And if an artist, for whatever reason, were unable to reschedule because of our volume of programming, or their lives have changed, their collaborators have changed, because we don't really know yet when we can reschedule, they'll get an additional 25%. So every artist would leave with a minimum of 75%, even if they're canceled. And in all the budget scenarios we ran, we can manage that. I'm grateful, and I'm also going to be applying for all of the relief funding available to make sure we can maintain that. But it's within reason, and it's board approved. And so it was this interesting combination of, okay, I have to look really realistically, pragmatically, and think creatively to try and support people, because again, it's about creating opportunities. We want opportunities for people to be able to continue to, in this moment, I'm going to say survive. I often prefer thrive, but right now it's a survival moment. So we want to make sure that what we offer through Dance Place can really help people survive this crisis, so that on the other end of weathering the storm, we can be the safe harbor where then they can come back and start to thrive again in their creative practices and how they share them. But it's been wild and tough. And I hear you on those long days. There was a night 2 weeks ago, I woke up at 1 in the morning and I realized I had all of this stuff, and I just brain dumped it into emails that I didn't send then. I scheduled to send the next morning, but like 2 hours of stuff came out of my head between 1 and 3 in the middle of the night. Ooh, this moment.
Yeah. I have not been doing as well as the 2 of you. Seems like on a personal note, my home structure is just gone. It's flipped on its head. So frankly, a lot of my putting out fires now, I have twin 4-year-old boys and a husband who's a school teacher. So I am very used to working at home in my space when my kids are at school and have time to do stuff. But it's just trying to make it through the end of the day. And if I have any extra headspace or physical, mental energy to put into work, I do. Taffety Punk is a lot smaller organization, so we have less project grants and more general op, which we're very grateful for. So with us, things are literally just we pressed pause for a little bit, and my biggest thing has been looking for the relief support, the grants to help get money for our organization. And I spent 3 or 4 hours yesterday or the day before just looking for opportunities for our company members as well as the folks that were supposed to be in our upcoming performance, finding opportunities for them to also apply for assistance. That's just been that's been it's been plaguing me, like how to help these people recover, because they're all gig workers and they're working contract to contract. And so that's been my biggest concern. And with Taffety Punk, it's our focuses are our community of supporters and then our artists. So in addition to trying to keep the artists at the forefront of my mind, I'm constantly thinking about how we can stay connected to our community. And so what is that going to look like? Are we going to do like many other theater and dance companies are doing? Are we going to put performances from the past online? How is that going to work? Do we charge a fee for it? Do we offer it for free? Those things. So that's what's been going on in my brain. Very little of it. There's a lot up here, which I have yet to wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and do gratefully, unless my kids wake me up to do it. But there's a lot in here, which I have not had a chance to actually sit down and write out and communicate to other people though. But this might be the impetus right here, this conversation, to get me to do it. So yeah.
But also this is so important. I'm really grateful that you brought up the challenges that this time is bringing forward. It brings forward different challenges that just are changing how home life is, what it's like for folks with young kids, school-age kids, college-age kids that have had huge challenges and can't get out of their dorm rooms, but had to be out of their dorm rooms, like all of these really crazy things that are disrupting what were our normal systems. And that it's important then to recognize, okay, so different people are going to have different, it's almost like I'm going to use the word skill set again. Different people are going to have different skill sets that can come forward while we're in this shift. And so to recognize also that communities, networks, families need to realign and lock into new roles of support. And so, just within my own little network, like someone the other day just was really clear, like they needed a little bit of space from some of the virtual work we were doing because they needed it. It doesn't even matter why they needed it, in fact. And so hopefully within our networks, we can recognize that all of these differences that we're going through, and also our unique individual different circumstances, personalities, cultures, might require different spaciousness. I mean, I think about what Denise said about how the Zoom schedules are crazy right now, and also the intensity of them. It might be an hour, but it is such an intense hour.
Sure.
So yeah, thank you for bringing that forward, because we can't all operate the same way, just like we can't all operate the same way when we're not in a global health and financial crisis.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
And Erin, I hear you. I mean, I have a 13-year-old who is upstairs right now, and I was like, do your homework, get online.
Yeah.
Along with the miniature schnauzer who's like, why is everybody home during our sin?
Right.
My dog has been freaking out. It's just been kind of interesting. And, my husband works for the federal government, so he is actually going into the city every day and, coming home. And as soon as he walks in, I'm like, go take those clothes off, go walk, there's also a very heightened awareness about what's happening inside versus what's happening outside and when it comes inside. So, I think this is the second space in my house where I've, kind of shifted to move, because the other piece to that is just like, I know how I operate, and like now I'm downstairs in the basement in the office, but I'm normally upstairs. I need some light. And, there are those things that we need in our processes too. And the adjustments are just kind of crazy. And here we are, week 3, and our governor has just said, shut it down, and has given no end date here for the state of Maryland. So who knows what that means?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unmatched, this world. I don't even know how to process it, but this helps. And I really appreciate all of you taking the time to share your thoughts, because I think it's going to be really, really beneficial. You never know what you listen to, what podcast, who you run into, that kind of sparks that positive, light and makes things a little bit more bearable. So kind of to wrap up here, I'm wondering if you guys wouldn't mind, beyond relationships and work, what keeps you positive, whether it be during a transition from artist to manager, or in a transition like we're in right now? What little things, material, physical, world, whatnot, keep you positive?
Knowing that we will come back together. Like I have no doubt that that we will find ourselves together in a space communally enjoying art. It may not look exactly how it did before initially in August, September, but maybe before, but the underlying reason that we all love the arts will continue. It will bring us back together. And I keep struggling, and this is something that I ask myself constantly as an artist and have for decades now. Like, does it really matter? Like in using the current circumstances as a barometer, do the arts really matter? There's so much else at stake. There's so much else going on. But hell yeah, the arts matter right now. Like it matters. I mean, we see everybody posting and saying, artists matter more now because everybody's really using them to keep them entertained and to keep them uplifted. But, and that's true. But the thing that I can clearly see that what we do truly matters, and we are going to come back together again. I have to keep that as my mantra. And that gives me inspiration, and that gives me hope, and that gets me out of bed every morning, because it is Groundhog's Day around here, but like, that's what keeps me going. It really does.
I do not want to be the one to have that last word, so I'm going to jump in before Denise does. Too much pressure. I think connected to that, and sort of two interrelated thoughts, is one is that every challenging moment also brings opportunities, and not to belie the seriousness of the health crisis and the great sadness and concern that I have about that. But out of the social distancing and out of the financial crisis aspects of this moment, I love what you said, Erin. We may not come back quite the same way, or how we gather again after this might not be the same way. And I think that's going to also yield newness and opportunity. Mm-hmm. And creative thinkers like artists will address that so beautifully and creatively. I can't imagine what that will be, and the many ways that will be. So that's something that's exciting to me. And very related to that, I was thinking back to the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and an opinion piece, I've already invoked her name once, but that Liz Lerman wrote, that talked about what it would be like if Wall Street turned over the reins to artists, and how great artists are at stretching $1 and making it look like 100. I'm definitely paraphrasing there, but the sentiment is true. And I just think that that is so true. The creative thinking that the artistic community brings to problem solving is unmatched. And it goes right back to those translatable skill sets, but also what we'll do within our own sector, I think will just be quite revolutionary. It already has been. We're seeing it in sort of one way, but in that moment that I long for and look forward to, when we can gather again in real life, IRL, I think we're going to start to see some beautiful shifts. And that's the thing that I'm trying to hold on to.
All right, Christopher, you should have closed. That was beautiful. But honestly, I think the one thing that really does keep me going every day is just the humanity of it all. I have seen people step up in ways that, had this been a pandemic, that I don't think they would have. And so I think, it's us as human beings coming together, just coming together, period. And that's what is just so beautiful. people who I would have never thought are doing. And that's inspiring to know that through all of the stuff that happens within our lives, the one thing is we are all human beings. We all are able to respond in ways that are just beyond our own capacity at times, but we do it. And we do it so well, and we do it so brilliantly. And I think when I see that happening across, all levels, across all people, regardless of race, color, creed, ethnicity, all the words that we're using now, it's just the one thing, the humanity. And that's just, as you're saying, when we come out on the other side, we know it's not going to be what we currently had or have. But what is that going to be, and how can we, how exciting is that? As Chris was saying, opportunity. Like, I'm kind of excited to see how we then come back together again to move whatever it is, the newness of it all, forward. And that's most exciting. Yeah.
I think you were a great closer. But thank you all so much. This has been such a bright spot in my week, and I've been looking forward to it tremendously. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time to squeeze yet another Zoom call in. And I wish you all the best. And again, thank you so much.
Thank
Likewise. You. Thank all of you. It's great to see you all.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, you too.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.